The story begins with the scene of a vast sky where the sun burns down on a huge and unfamiliar world, and for a moment the bright blue sky looks peaceful. That peace disappears instantly when a huge dragon with 9 heads, named Hydreigon, roars, shaking the ground and freezing the slave soldiers in fear. Even though they are terrified, they have no choice but to raise their spears and bang them together. Hopping the noise will scare the creature. The battlefield is full of dust, shouting, and blood, and through all the fighting, one warrior moves with steady, sharp precision. He cuts down an enemy with a single clean strike, showing no hesitation. While the enemies step back from him, calling him a monster, too afraid to stand near him. But even he is barely holding on. His hands tremble, his breathing is rough, and his body feels close to giving out. The enemy notices his weakness and rushes toward him with loud screams. Covered in blood and trying to pull in air, he lifts his head, but his vision is fading fast, and his strength is completely gone. He felt like his heart was about to burst, and it felt like a knife scraping the roof of his mouth as he exhaled, as he finally collapses, falling helplessly toward the battlefield below, not able to tell if what was dripping from him was blood or sweat, and all his senses were telling him one thing, that this was not some graphic effect in reality. But as he drops, bright holographic messages appear around him. They announce that powerful hidden traits of heart of the iron-blooded monarch, along with weapon master, masterful hands, and many others have awakened within him. Suddenly filled with new strength, he crashes into the enemy lines with surprising force and releases one last desperate attack. Then everything fades away as he was overpowered. The scene then shifts into a completely opposite landscape, a small, cluttered modern room. A man sits alone in the dark, lit only by his computer screen, which shows a large "Game Over." This is our protagonist Park, who leans back in his chair with a mix of frustration and disappointment. His name was supposed to symbolize a wise life, yet he spends every day in this cramped room, surrounded by empty cups, trash, and the blue glow of his monitor. He played games on weekdays, not even during weekends, while everyone else works hard and when he quit his job. A few months ago, he holed up alone in his room and lived like a gaming addict, but then he started doing it again, and 5 whole years, he has focused on a single game and ignored almost everything happening around him. He hardly leaves his room. He barely keeps track of real life anymore. The game he can't let go of is Pangania, which gained brief popularity 5 years ago with the promise that if someone cleared the game, then the developers will grant him one dream. But they have promoted this phrase, which was a ridiculous line, and players with too much time on their hands got curious and tried it, but they ultimately failed. Now 5 years have passed and no one cleared it, and the player count had dropped significantly. And now if Park is not logged in the game, it shows that the number of online players of the game is 0. The game was infamous for its brutal difficulty when it launched. And Park remembered the old forum posts full of anger and people quitting after facing bosses that were almost impossible to defeat, along with companions who will betray you without warning. And if this was not enough, the game had named NPCs that could destroy characters instantly. In this game, death deletes a character forever. Hours, days, weeks, or even years of progress disappear in seconds. His overflowing ashtray reminds him of how long the game's community has been gone. He thinks about his most recent loss, another strong character permanently erased. 5 years of non-stop effort with the character, along with having 8 of the 15 known unique items, which are all gone, making him feel tired and empty. But then a notification pops up on his screen and catches his attention. His latest death has earned him a whopping 1.6 million soul points, far more than he has ever received. Even deleting hundreds of characters never came close to this amount, nearly 80,000 points in total. The game had a soul point system, and the game awards the player soul points corresponding to the value of their dead character, as these points let players buy talents and start their next life stronger. With 1.6 million points, he can boost almost everything from the beginning. He remembers a previous warrior who he created with an investment of 10,000 soul points into sword abilities. And then he died with the title Master of Swordsmanship. Yet even that character's soul value was tiny compared to this, as any talent had investment limit of 10,000 soul points. Now Park can actually pretty much invest in everything, and even when normally. The boy would pick safe and predictable magic talents, but this time he feels different. Since he no longer expects to beat the game, he decides to take a chance. He presses the random button, wanting to create one final character just for fun. He confirms the choice without thinking too deeply. As the screen loads, his mind drifts to a painful memory. He remembers sitting in a coffee shop while the woman he loved calmly ended their relationship. She explained, point by point, how he had no ambition, no direction, and no real plan for life. Her words hurt more than any in-game death, and he didn't know how to defend himself. He had nothing to say. But she compared him to people their age who already had good jobs and stable lives, and each comparison only made him feel smaller. Her disappointment was clear in her voice and on her face, as if he was the only one who had failed to keep up with the world. Shame pushed his eyes to the floor while everything around him felt like it was falling apart in that quiet cafe. With a tired sigh, she ended their 5 years together and walked away with her final live well that sounded empty compared to the heavy darkness settling inside him. He stayed there alone in the cold, dull light of the cafe, feeling separated from reality itself. That moment cut the last connection he had to the real world and left him drifting, unsure of what he even had left. So 3 months ago, driven by bitterness and hopelessness, he quit his dead-end job and escaped fully into the digital world that felt safer than anything outside. Now, staring at his screen, he tells himself that he will stop being the pathetic version of who he was. Using his huge amount of soul points, he begins upgrading his character with rapid speed. The screen flashes brightly in his glasses as the system told him that a hidden piece had been activated, immediately shocking Park. As he wondered what it was, it congratulates Park for meeting the requirements for something called a singularity. Before he can react, the boundary between the game and his room shatters. The monitor pulls him forward as the digital world becomes real, dragging him into a burst of blinding crimson light. A monstrous voice roars somewhere in the void, filled with destructive power and divine anger. A sharp, crushing pain hits his head, forcing him to his knees as his mind feels like it's being rewritten. The voice told him that all the words that he created would burn to ashes because he was a wicked god. His body collapses to the floor, knocked unconscious by the overwhelming force. In the dark room, his monitor flickers with a strange pulse, showing a cryptic prophecy about a being standing at the center of creation and destruction. The final message wishes that he may find his happiness in Pangea. He wakes up with a harsh smack to the ribs, jerking him back to consciousness in a dusty, unfamiliar place. A harsh overseer stands above him, shouting threats and telling him to get up or be thrown to the High Dragon. The mention of the High Dragon freezes him. He knows that name from the game. A whip cracks near him, but his eyes are fixed on the horizon. There in the distance, he sees the massive, multi-headed monsters he has defeated thousands of times through a screen. Seeing them in real life shakes him at his core. Another slave pushes him into line, scared of punishment from their captors. But he barely notices because his mind is racing, trying to understand how he went from his room to this burning desert. A low growl escapes his throat as his panic slowly transforms into focused analysis. Everything around him matches Pangea's world exactly. He knows this place too well. As if reacting to his realization, the boy called out to the status window, and a holographic status window appears in the air. His eyes widen as he reads it. It confirms the impossible. All his starting stats are maxed at 12, and the list of hidden traits is incredibly long. He stands among the other slaves, finally accepting that he has physically entered the game. The interface floats steadily, proving that this is no hallucination. He studies the numbers again. Starting with stats of 12 should be completely impossible, because starts should range from 1 to 10 depending on the invested soul points. What was even more shocking was the long list of 13 legendary traits, something that should never exist on a level 1 character. Before he can process everything, the ground begins shaking violently. The veteran slaves around him stop moving, fear spreading across their faces. A thick cloud of dust rises in the distance, showing that something massive is approaching. Screams break out as the Desert Queen's army charges forward, riding huge hydras. At the front is the Snake Princess, her presence radiating dangerous power as she commands her beasts. He recognizes her immediately, a major NPC he has read about countless times in the game's lore. A sharp chime echoes above the battlefield. A new window appears, announcing the start of a main quest. The message is simple but terrifying: survive or die in both the game and the real world. The penalty sends a surge of fear through him, cold and instinctive. The sky was filled with a wave of black arrows that started falling on the unprotected slaves. Men scream and collapse as the arrows strike, while everyone else panics. But Park was incredibly still, overwhelmed by the sheer reality of the situation. But just then, a calm blue energy surrounds him, the activation of the heart of the iron-blooded monarch, which was a linked trade that only appears when every physical talent is maxed out. Park knew that this prevents exhaustion, reduces his chances of being caught off guard, and allows him to grasp the situation rapidly. His eyes lock onto a sword lying in the sand. He knows that standing still will get him killed. He moves quickly, dodging a falling body and grabbing the weapon. The weight of the blade feels strangely natural in his hand. As he rises, the sword vibrates faintly, responding to the power inside him. An overseer swings at him in panic, but he blocks the strike without hesitation. His counterattack is fast and clean, cutting down the man in a single motion. Blood hits the sand, but he doesn't flinch. His body moves with precision as the system was activated, once again telling the boy that his hidden rate of the weapon master has been activated, and now the boy knew what he had to do. As the battlefield shifted around him, Park noticed a group of slavers rushing toward him. Spotting a lone survivor in the chaos, they hurled insults while closing in with obvious intent to kill. But before their heavy blows could land, Park was already gone. Their weapons cut only through empty air, missing him by a split second. His body moved on instinct, weaving past a spear whose razor-sharp tip nearly brushed his cheek. When his fingers closed around the shaft of the weapon, a strange sense of familiarity pulsed through his muscles, even though it was the first time he had ever held such a weapon in real life. Fueled by his hidden traits, he countered instantly, driving the stolen spear straight through the slaver with the clean precision of a veteran fighter. His movements came faster and sharper than he could consciously follow, causing panic to spread among the surrounding enemies as their comrades fell. Park moved like a phantom across the sand, his body twisting and striking with smooth, deadly efficiency that no novice should possess. Even through the rush of adrenaline, he found himself staring in disbelief. These were actions he only ever performed through a keyboard, yet now his body acted as though it had trained for years. Another attack snapped him back into focus. He parried a lethal strike that would have taken off his head, and as he did, a strange haze lifted from his senses. His observation trait activated, showing faint lines of mana flowing inside his opponent's body. At the same time, a system message echoed in his mind, telling him he could now predict attack trajectories before they even began. With this new clarity, he slipped through the melee with ease. An enemy blade sliced harmlessly through the space he had occupied a moment earlier, and Park retaliated with a crushing counter that shattered the slaver's guard and ended the duel instantly. Without missing a beat, he snatched a battle axe out of the air. His stance adjusted instinctively, guided by weapon mastery, letting him swing the new weapon with perfect balance. His downward strike crushed the defense of another attacker, sending the slaver skidding across the sand. One by one, the enemies recoiled in fear as their squad fell apart. They had charged a slave, only to realize too late that they were facing something far more dangerous. But as the last of the immediate threats fell silent, the exertion hit Park like a wall. His breath came in heavy gasps, sweat pouring down his face as the adrenaline faded. His body had been pushed far past its limits, and the overwhelming power of his traits clashed with the simple human stamina he possessed. The remaining slavers hesitated, unsettled by the sight of a single man holding their entire squad at bay. A blue window appeared before Park's eyes, informing him that his weapon proficiency was rising at an unnatural rate. It was already at level 6, something most players needed weeks to achieve. But when he looked at his trembling hand, he understood the truth. Legendary skills meant nothing if his physical strength burned out. Looking across the battlefield and seeing the hundreds of enemies still out there, despair began to creep in. Survival felt impossible. Far away, in a throne room bathed in red light, the Desert Queen lounged on her seat while the air around her remained tense and silent. She studied the kneeling figure before her, Isabella, the Snake Princess, her single red eye glowing with cold disappointment. She spoke sharply, revealing her true concern. If any witnesses survived the failed expedition, her city would be blamed. To prevent that outcome, she ordered Isabella to return to the Celtsman Desert and wipe out every remaining straggler. As Isabella rose to leave, the Queen offered one final hook, a promise to lift the curse binding her if she succeeded. Shame and hope flickered together across Isabella's face, and the Queen's warning echoed behind her as she left. Failure would bring a fate worse than death. Under the open sky, Isabella stood atop her massive hydra, the wind sweeping through her black hair as she surveyed the battlefield below. Her sharp eyes scanned the carnage until they landed on a lone figure still standing. From Park's perspective, she looked like a dark silhouette framed by sunlight, poised on top of a living mountain of scaled muscle. Isabella narrowed her eyes, both annoyed and intrigued that a mere slave had survived the initial slaughter. Park leaned heavily on his sword, barely able to keep himself upright as the last of his adrenaline drained away. His vision blurred and his breath trembled. But just as his legs threatened to give out, a familiar chime rang in the air and a system message appeared. His health and mana had been fully restored due to his level being increased to level 2. Energy surged through his body, clearing his fatigue in an instant. He stood tall again, ready to fight if necessary. The slavers nearby, unaware of his sudden recovery, charged toward him to finish the job. Their attack never landed. A massive shadow swept over them before the Hydra's tail slammed into the ground, crushing them in a single impact. Park looked up in awe and dread. The true boss of the area had arrived. Isabella stepped forward on her rocky perch, her presence alone freezing the air around her. Park's great sage trait attempted to analyze her, but the system only returned errors. He caught a glimpse of her level 8. His heart sank. In Pangenia, anything above level 7 was considered a natural disaster, a force usually dealt with by an entire raid team, not a lone beginner. Standing before her wasn't a battle, it was suicide. A glitching status window revealed one more detail. Isabella was suffering from a curse tied to the Desert Queen. Park's eyes widened. This was lore he knew well and the only possible advantage he had. As Isabella looked down at him with cold indifference, acknowledging his skill yet deeming it meaningless, her killing intent burst forth. A spectral snake formed behind her as she vanished from sight. In a blink, she reappeared right in front of him, blade raised to end his life. The strike came so fast it blurred. But in that narrow moment, just a fraction of a second, Park didn't raise his sword. He smirked. And instead of defending, he blocked her killing blow with words, shouting a question about if she wanted to be free from the Queen's curse. It was so shocking that froze her blade inches from his throat. The shockwave of Isabella's halted strike blew Park's hair back, the cold edge of her blade resting lightly against his throat. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief, her murderous composure shattered by the piece of secret lore he had just revealed. A heavy silence settled between them as she stared into his eyes, her killing intent slowly fatting into a trembling curiosity. Park kept his voice steady as he recited the hidden lore tied to her character, claiming confidently to be a starbearer who could read the destiny of the stars. With absolute certainty, he offered her the one thing she desired more than anything else, a way to break the Queen's curse. The moment he mentioned lifting the curse, Isabella's pupils widened, hope flickering inside her despite the suspicion locked in her gaze. Bit by bit, the tension drained from her posture. She lowered her weapon, proving that his risky gamble had paid off. Inside, Park quietly acknowledged the truth. The Starbearer was a rare NPC class required to surpass the game's level cap, and according to the lore he remembered, Isabella could only escape the Queen's curse with the blessing of a Starbearer. He watched her closely, noticing the tiny tremble in her shoulders as she struggled to hide how badly she wanted freedom. In that instant, he knew he had won. Her desperation made her vulnerable to his words. Seeing her hesitation stirred something strange in him, part pride, part guilt. He was the one who had designed her character. Isabella was meant to be a major protagonist, a figure who would travel the world and witness the game's ending. But because his own run began in a different region, she was left behind, trapped in the desert by a cruel narrative thread he himself had written. Breaking the quiet, Isabella finally asked for his name. Her voice was softer now, less of a predator assessing prey, more of someone speaking to a potential savior. Park smoothly adopted the persona he had crafted and introduced himself as Randolph, a name that suited his invented role. She turned away, her red cape sweeping through the air as she announced that his execution was postponed. His life was spared for now. But she glanced back sharply to warn him that deceit would earn him a fate far more gruesome than death, promising to tear him apart if he failed to fulfill his promise. With a single command, she ordered her troops to treat him as an honored guest, instantly changing his status from slave to VIP. A blue system window flashed before him, confirming the completion of Main Quest 1. Survival, followed by a cascade of notifications and rewards from the constellations of fortune and battle. The moment the adrenaline left him, his legs gave out and he collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by the absurdity of what he had just lived through. Another notification informed him that his extraordinary score would be recorded in the Global Hall of Fame. Time passed, and the scene shifted to the cool moonlit towers of Isabella's palace. Now resting in a luxurious bath far removed from the blood and dust of the battlefield, Park examined the loot he had received. Among them were the legendary sword of Mashella, the soul of a high dragon, an ultra-rare item that had only appeared once in the game's history, and a broken golden scale with a cryptic ability to synchronize reality and Pangenia. His quiet moment was abruptly interrupted as the bathhouse doors swung open and three lightly dressed maids entered, smiling brightly as they approached. Their task was to wash him, a normal service for honored guests, but a terrifying situation for him. Startled and panicking internally, he stiffly requested that they wash only his feet, trying to maintain the aloof persona of a starbearer. As they scrubbed, the clear physical sensation of their touch made him acutely aware of how real this world had become. He noticed the maids exchanging subtle, knowing looks. His paranoia spiked. They were Isabella's spies testing him for any inconsistency. Park forced himself to stay calm, eyes closed, trying to act like someone untouched by earthly desires. Then one maid suddenly gasped. Park's heart lurched, but she was staring at a glowing blue system window that had appeared between them. He opened his eyes to see the Hall of Fame ranking, along with a disturbing countdown titled Pangenia Breakdown. As he scanned the list of names, shock hit him. He recognized the players ranked below him. His old guildmates Gracia and Mint Chocolate had been summoned here as well. The system then displayed another message. Because he ranked in the survival quest, the logout feature was now unlocked. His thoughts derailed when the maid questioned him about being a starbearer, almost catching him off guard. Park snapped his head in her direction, nearly breaking character from sheer surprise. Determination replaced panic as he realized the implications. If he could log out, he could escape this world. But a warning popped up, stating that his character would remain vulnerable in-game while he was gone, and if the character died, so would he. Even so, relief washed over him. It was still a chance. He stood abruptly, splashing water everywhere, and ordered the maids to leave so he could communicate with the stars. Confused and clearly skeptical, they hesitated, but the weight of Isabella's authority pushed them into obedience. Once the door closed, Park slumped in the bath, letting out a long sigh of relief. His flimsy excuse had somehow worked. Staring at the ripples in the water, he finally admitted how terrified he had been of being trapped forever. With a quiet vow to escape this nightmare, he reached out and pressed logout. As his consciousness faded, one last ominous message appeared. If your character dies while you are gone, you die in reality. The scene snapped back to the real world. The moment Park regained consciousness, he jolted upright in his gaming chair, drenched in cold sweat, gasping like someone waking from a nightmare. Outside his window, loud crashes and screams echoed through the streets. Confused and trembling, he walked over to see what was happening, but what he saw froze him in absolute horror. Monsters from Pangenia were roaming the real world, tearing through the streets and emerging from fires that raged across the city. A shriek from one of the creatures pierced the night. Park stumbled backward in shock, falling onto his bed. As he hit the mattress, something slipped out of his pocket, the broken golden scale, and it struck the floor with a sharp, chiming sound. His breath caught in his throat as he picked up the golden fragment, the one piece of proof he wished he could deny. The moment he felt its weight in his hand, the reality he had been resisting finally broke through. He shoved it into his pocket quickly, mind racing at the terrifying implication that the digital world wasn't just leaking into the physical one, it was merging with it. He turned toward his computer, hopping for even a sliver of normalcy, but the game's homepage was gone, replaced by an error message about inquiries. Before he could process it, a scream from outside ripped through the air, freezing him in place. He ran to the window, and what he saw turned his stomach. A giant insectoid monster was emerging from flames, licking its legs, while he slashed through multiple innocent humans, its eyes glowing with unnatural hunger. Down on the street, creatures ripped through crowds of civilians. Police fired desperately, but their bullets bounced off the armored hide of a towering mantis-like beast, while they called out for reinforcements due to the emergency situation, as multiple unidentified monsters have appeared. Even Park's phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating violently with continuous emergency alerts, each one warning of unidentified attacks across the region. Park stared out the window, unable to understand why monsters from Pangea were tearing apart the real world. Then, a massive mantis turned its head toward him. Their eyes met through the glass. Its mandibles twitched as if choosing him next. His legs gave out and he collapsed to the floor, glasses slipping askew on his face. As we see that again. The golden shattered piece fell down, and Park wondered if the boundary between the reality and the game was really broken. But suddenly, a system notification popped up telling the boy that as the game's destruction progresses, the boundary between reality and the game weakens. And if the destruction progress exceeds 10%, then the first gate will take place, and the progress was already at 7.6% and was rising fast. Panic clawed at his chest. He had no weapon, no armor, no way to defend himself in the real world. His gaze locked onto the golden fragment lying on the floor, his only possible hope. Scrambling forward, the boy reached for it, clinging to the idea that if monsters from the game were roaming freely in reality, then maybe things obtained in the game can also be used in reality. Thinking about that, Pac ran towards a stable and saw a pouch which was present there. And as he opened it, he saw that it was his inventory, which included the sword of Mashella and the soul of the High Dragon. He clutched the glowing red gem, but nothing happened. There was no simple double-click mechanic here. Frustration surged as he stared at the interface, realizing he didn't know how to manually activate any of the items. But the system window clarified it that the fragment of the broken golden scale allows synchronization between reality and the game, and it can be toggled on and off on whim, with the remaining time of 24 hours as Park thought about activating it. A small fairy appeared behind. And then the synchronization began, with the time limit of 24 hours before the synchronization gets over, and now he, being turned into Randolph. At the same time, the city streets had become an inferno of smoke, fire, and blood. Corpses lay scattered across cracked pavement. A mother sprinted through the chaos, clutching her young daughter as explosions shook the ground. The child cried helplessly for her father, and the mother, already short of breath, promised he would be there soon as she pulled her along. But just then, something happened above them, and a chunk of concrete broke off a collapsing building. It plummeted down, smashing into the street. The impact sent the little girl tumbling away, while her mother was crushed under the rubble. Blood trickled down the woman's head as she screamed for her daughter to run. A young woman in business clothes rushed forward, trembling as she grabbed the crying child. The mother, already losing her strength, begged the stranger to take her daughter and save her. With tears in her eyes, the office worker pulled the girl away from the crumbling ruins just as a towering mantis creature opened its mouth to devour them. The child was shielded by the stranger's arms as the creature dropped toward the helpless woman, while she thought about if this is how they will die. But before it could reach her, a sharp blade sliced through the air. As a flash of blue light illuminated the dust, A massive sword tore through the monster in a single strike, splitting it cleanly in two. Green blood splattered across the ground as a figure landed with heavy impact among the rubble. The young woman froze, clutching the girl tightly as she realized that she was alive, and she stared at the newcomer. A man wearing weird clothes in comparison to today's standards, yet wielding a blade straight out of a fantasy world. His expression calm, focused, and impossibly composed amid the destruction. Before she could speak, the air behind him shifted. From within the smoke, a huge serpentine head lunged forward, its single red eye burning with predatory hunger. The woman screamed a warning, but he was already moving, instincts sharpened by the synchronization, reacting to the threat behind him before the monster even fully emerged. With a fluid motion, Park slashed upward, intercepting the monster's attack with a burst of red energy. The creature staggered backward, green blood splattering across the pavement, as the woman holding the child watched the impossible scene unfold. But the lady was still going to get shocked, because now what she saw was straight out from comic books. Because behind our boy was a dragon with 9 heads, as its eyes were glowing in crimson, and before wasting any time, Park jumped onto one of the 9 heads of the high dragon and turned towards the lady, telling her to stay still. But the lady, on the other hand, wondered if she was dreaming, because what she saw cannot be true. But just then, the child jumped away from the lady's hand, immediately running towards her mother and wondering if she was all right. But now she saw that our boy was defeating every wild creature that was attacking the city with the help of the 9-headed dragon. Wondering about who he was or what he was doing in a place like this, we come to know that monsters appeared simultaneously across the entire world, and not just one country, and as soon as they appeared, they immediately killed people and destroyed human civilization. However, they were not the only ones who appeared, and yet, humanity wasn't entirely defenseless. Some individuals had awakened, gaining superhuman strength just like the players from Pangania. A gleaming suit of armor flashed on a survivor's screen, symbolizing the return of the game's mechanics to reality. These people were able to cut down monsters who were immune to bullets as if they were nothing. In another part of the world, a charismatic player stood atop a tank, sword raised high as he rallied terrified civilians with shouts of unity. His speech broadcast lived through countless smartphones, painting him as a hero in humanity's darkest hour. And with this, Park knew that the world was rapidly changing. But as the scene shifts, we see someone who was watching this broadcast from a luxury apartment. He was a dark-haired man, and he scoffed at the display as he called the player an idiot for wasting his fragments of the broken golden scale. We see that in his hand, he held a golden fragment, one the system identified as belonging to Massacre, a top-tier ranker. And we come to know that it had now been confirmed that reality and the game were beginning to merge. The whole place might merge into one world over time, and in the coming age of chaos, everyone will become a competitor, and only those who obtain more fragments and more power will become the protagonists of that era. Because the ranking that remained unchanged for 2 years have finally been updated too. And the top score was an absurd amount of 220 points, and we also see that Massacre was at the 5th place, and at the 1st place was Randolph, and Massacre wondered if this guy was Phantom. We come to know that Phantom was also known as a ghost. Because since no one knows of his name, everyone refers to him by these 2 nicknames. And Phantom was the first person to form an NPC expedition, and he called it the Demon Realm Expedition, as he became the only one to reach just before the game's final clear, and even after multiple tries it ended in complete failure. But still, Phantom was undeniably the #1 player of the whole game, and since the strongest character he possessed would be summoned upon, that meant that Randolph must be some and end the game the moment the expedition failed, even when the appearance and the equipment were reset. But talents from the previous character carry over, which is why Massacre thought that he understood about how Randolph got such a high score. The scene shifts, and we see that Randolph was back in the game as he leaned back in the warm bathwater, rubbing his chin as he connected the threads of his past experiences. It became clear that the monsters appearing in reality were mirroring the arrival of players in the game world. As he closed his eyes, he recalled the Demon Realm expedition, his near-successful run filled with unexpected sabotage. He remembered a loyal knight kneeling in defeat, surrounded by falling swords, a heartbreaking symbol of his past failure. But now he understood. The hired NPC mercenaries who had suddenly acted irrationally weren't glitches. They were other players, summoned into the game with agendas of their own. The realization hit him that the betrayal he suffered was likely the work of someone who considered Phantom their rival. Rising from the bath with a renewed sense of urgency, he dried himself quickly. The boy knew that if he had been targeted before, then with his current ranking, he was an even bigger target now. Walking through the opulent palace halls, he reasoned that with the boundary collapsing between reality and the game, there was no safe place, neither in the game nor in reality. The only path forward was simple: become overwhelmingly powerful before the merge completed. He arrived at the throne room, where Isabella sat in regal command. She fixed him with a piercing gaze and asked if he was ready to fulfill his promise. Park responded with confident certainty, but before she could say more, he boldly stated his own terms first. The princess wondered about what they were, and shockingly Randolph demanded that he wanted an entry into the sanctuary. The request was audacious, almost insane given his current level, but he explained his reasoning. If the first main quest was survival, then the second quest was about obtaining a class. And he didn't want just any class, he aimed for the very top. So he told Isabella that he knew the location of a star that can only be obtained there. It is then that a system notification appeared. And the boy smiled as he had to obtain a class, and the rewards vary depending on the rank of the class obtained. He had to obtain a class in the sanctuary, and the quest ends immediately upon obtaining it. As the scene shifted, the cold stone floors of the palace were littered with bodies. The guards who had stood in Isabella's way lay twisted and lifeless, their blood pooling beneath them. Isabella wiped her face clean without the slightest hint of remorse. Behind her was Randolph, who watched in an uneasy silence, shaken by how effortlessly she had slaughtered an entire squad. Knowing that there is no ally more reliable than her, the scene shifts to a few hours earlier, where we see that Randolph told Isabella that the star was present there. And we come to know that the boy found out about the fourth star by chance while raising his previous character. And he was probably the only player who knows its precise location, as he told the girl that to lift the curse with the blessing of the stars, he must obtain it. But Isabella told him that the sanctuary was not a place just anyone can enter and if anyone finds out that the lady had secretly brought someone in, then things would not be good. But Randolph persuaded her by telling her that there was no time and that she should think carefully because this was her last chance to leave the desert. We're back. Present as we see that Park knew that without his earlier persuasion, his own head might have been lying among the rest. His thoughts were interrupted when Isabella stopped before a massive, ominous doorway. She announced that this was their destination, and a staircase dropped into a suffocating darkness below, which was called the Holy Ground. A system warning floated before Park, identifying the place as the hidden sanctuary of the desert, and Park clearly knew that his level was nowhere near high enough to survive the poison inside. The system told him that the recommended level was level 8. And as the area was overflowing with poison and demonic energy, entry was not advised for the boy. Yet the purple miasma that swirled around them didn't harm him at all, sliding off his body as though repelled by an invisible barrier. His giant's demon resistance made him immune, and he quietly calculated his next move. A level 2 player should never set foot here, but with Isabella's overwhelming strength clearing the exploration subquest would be simple. Even so, as his foot touched the first step, his expression hardened. He wasn't here for simple exploration. The main quest hovering in front of him demanded that he obtain a class, and he knew the tier of the class depended entirely on his actions within this sanctuary. His ambitions stretched past ordinary professions. He was aiming for something far rarer, one of the mysterious ones. Before he could descend further, Isabella looked at the cliff. She just smugged, thinking that even the Starbearer have taken the wrong path. But as she turned around and started going away, the boy grabbed her shoulders. Wondering about where she was going, Isabella smiled nervously. telling Randolph that the bridge ahead was a trap and the downward air currents were designed to sweep away anyone who crosses without knowing. But before the lady could even finish it off, Randolph wondered if she was scared of heights. This hit the nerve of the lady as she nervously turned around and told the boy that she knew nothing, which was called fear in her dictionary. But the boy continuously called her out, calling her timid and whatnot, but the lady kept on telling the boy that the odds of the bridge being a trap was high, and conveniently, she had just got a cramp in her leg, so she should check for a safer route. But hearing that Randolph got down and asked Isabella to get on his back, the girl was so flustered by this that she asked if the boy had a death wish, but Randolph calmly wondered if Isabella did not have a cramp, and as there was number time, she would have to get on quickly because the dead warriors would be alive in a few moments. And whenever the princess would be suspected for not being in the castle, the queen's pursuit team will arrive. So rather than wasting their time, it's better for the boy to carry her even when the lady blushed. She knew that the boy was right, climbing onto the shoulders of Randolph while cursing her so-called cramped leg, but the boy told her to hold tight as both of them started jumping around. And suddenly the snake princess noticed that Randolph was going the wrong way towards the empty void, instead of the bridge, and now the girl started screaming, wondering about why Randolph was doing so. But not heeding to any warnings of the girl, Randolph jumped straight onto the air while he activated his hidden trait of the mutant, which had the powers that allows the person to see all the secrets invisible to human eyes. And we see that the void had a secret staircase, and there was an invisible path present there, as Isabella was shocked. Randolph told her that this was the real path, and she wondered about why a mere commoner knew about a path that even she did not know about. And even in this sanctuary, which was overflowing with poison and demonic energy, Randolph was not even gasping for breath, and she knew that there were too many strange things happening to chalk up to simply being a star-bearer. But before the lady could think further, Randolph turned around and teased Isabella for having acrophobia. The princess was shocked that Randolph was acting so relaxed in front of her, and this was not just some confidence that comes from being strong. And it was as if Randolph was welcoming an old friend that he hadn't seen in years. Unable to hold back any longer, she stared into his eyes and asked the question haunting her, whether they had met before. Park ignored it at first. But then he decided to tell the lady that they have met in the same place. But even when the boy had seen her, the snake princess had never seen him. As both of them reached the end of the stairs, the light expanded around them, and when it faded, they found themselves lying on a serene grassy hillside, far removed from the abyss below. Park explained that they had passed through a domain barrier, a magical filter designed to hide the true sanctuary from anyone unworthy of reaching it. As petals drifted softly across the hillside, his expression sharpened. His memories of the game warned him that something would begin at any moment. That instinct was confirmed when, deep within the rock face before them, a single red eye snapped open and glowed with an ancient mechanical malice. From the shadows, massive stone shapes began to stir. One by one, their eyes ignited like burning coals in the dark. A towering golem rose from the earth, its molten core throbbing in its chest like a miniature sun. Park assessed the creature immediately, recognizing the rune engraved on its chest as the mark of an upper-tier guardian, one strong enough to kill him instantly. Despite the danger, he turned to Isabella with a confident grin, teasing her about whether her supposed leg cramp had healed enough for a fight. Annoyed by all those stones, the snake princess told Randolph to just shut up and watch while we see that multiple rock golems started running towards the duo, getting ready to punch Isabella first with all their might. But the lady was standing without any fear, and she was just smiling, while she descended on the monster like a flash of red lightning, striking every weak point on the golem's body with overwhelming speed and precision. The massive construct trembled mid-attack, its rocky frame fracturing under the impossibly fast assault. Park observed with a satisfied smile, amazed once again by the absurd efficiency of an assassination class overwhelming a tank-type monster that should have required a full raid party. Even when Pack had made the character by himself, it was still absurd for him, because this is what a level 8 really meant, and this is how much power it possessed. The golem collapsed into glowing shards before it could recover, unable to withstand the sheer difference in stats. As the dust settled, a blue system window appeared before Park, surprising him with a new option, the Golem Maker class. Park realized that since they were traveling together, Isabella's kill had been credited to him as well. Park considered it carefully. Summoner-type classes were rare and extremely versatile, and obtaining one this early was something most players could only dream of. But he pressed the decline button without hesitation. He hadn't come this far for a high-tier prize. His target lay much higher. Before the window even faded, the ground trembled again. Dark purple shadows seeped up from the earth like smoke, twisting and gathering into a vortex of ominous energy. Isabella felt the change immediately and spun around with her dagger raised, sensing a threat far beyond the previous guardians. The swirling energy condensed, forming a massive silhouette that dwarfed the earlier golems. A system message echoed through the sanctuary, announcing the awakening of the ancient king, the true master of the mountain buried beneath the nameless star. Park lifted his gaze toward the darkness above them, because this was the entity he had come for. A colossal serpentine head emerged from the shadows, its purple eyes burning with divine, otherworldly power. Park and Isabella stood side by side, tiny figures facing the majestic and terrifying form of the ancient King Dramut. A final warning flashed across Park's vision in blinding red, declaring that his level was catastrophically insufficient for a challenge meant for level 10. Yet he stared straight ahead, unwavering. The crushing aura of the ancient king descended on Park like a physical weight, forcing the air from his lungs and leaving him momentarily breathless. High above them, the colossal mountain guardian coiled through the sky, its body so immense that it eclipsed the sun. Trying to keep himself composed, Park shot Isabella a shaky smile, but the lady wondered if he expected her to fight something of that scale alone. But the boy started explaining that the snake princess should not worry because despite how the mountain guardian looks, he was actually quite gentle and he never attacks first. But before the sentence was even completed, the serpent lashed down with devastating force, shattering the earth and exposing the lie behind his casual tone. Isabella was flung across the ground, escaping only because her instincts carried her away from the destruction at the last possible second. Park stood frozen amid the debris with an awkward grin, realizing too late that the guardian he remembered as almost gentle was anything but that. Isabella's glare burned with disbelief and fury, her expression torn between shocked outrage and murderous intent at the deception he had fed her. He stared at the serpent in genuine confusion, wondering why the wise and cooperative guardian from his past runs had turned into a berserk monster intent on crushing them both. But Isabella screamed, wondering if the snake was looking friendly to Randolph. But then the ancient king's hiss reverberated through the sanctuary, as it demanded proof of their qualification through combat. Isabella shouted at him, demanding an explanation for why she was targeted when she was not the one challenging the sanctuary, but the snake immediately told her that she had defeated his sentence, and now she was denying her intent. Now Isabella realized about what had happened, and the snake told her that if she cannot prove herself, then she will never leave alive. There was another catastrophic strike that forced her into a frantic dance between life and death. Every attack drove her closer to exhaustion. She screamed for instructions, while Park mentally scrambled to understand why the timeline had changed. Then the realization struck him like a lightning bolt. He remembered the deepest lore of Dramut, the enchanted beast that grew wise by consuming the spiritual energy of the star. In his previous life, he had cleared this sanctuary using Wilhelm, a character who had already reached level 10 and transcended the mortal limit by getting 5 stars. Dramut had recognized Wilhelm's overwhelming power and guided him directly to the reward. The truth was simple and cruel. Dramut only respected strength. Anyone weaker than him was nothing more than prey. Park bit his thumb in frustration. At level 2, the Guardian saw him as food. Meanwhile, Isabella was being tossed around like a rag doll. The serpent's overwhelming force sent her skidding across the dirt. The sanctuary's poison was finally taking effect as well, tightening around her lungs and muscles, making every movement painfully slow. The lady continuously wondered if stepping into this place, after hearing what the star-bearer said was a mistake. Just as the final, lethal blow descended toward Isabella, a sharp, commanding voice cut across the battlefield, ordering the beast to halt. To her complete disbelief, the enormous serpent froze mid-strike. Its massive, ancient gaze turned toward Park, narrowing with suspicion as the creature wondered about why he knew the serpent's true name. Park stepped forward with the practiced confidence of someone who knew exactly what to say, as he boldly claimed that the snake's master, Wilhelm, the transcendent being Dramut once served with absolute loyalty, has returned. The Guardian hesitated as it tried to reconcile the weak human standing before it with the legendary hero it remembered. The hesitation gave way to a deep, earth-shaking laughter that made the ground tremble. The beast mocked him, pointing out that he was even weaker than the stone golems outside, nowhere near the transcendence that defined Wilhelm. It remembered Wilhelm, and it also knew that the man had failed the demon realm expedition, his death absolute. Infuriated by Park's supposed impersonation of its dead master, Dramut opened its jaw to devour him whole. Yet Park didn't move. He held his ground with an unnatural stillness. Instead of pleading, he uttered a single phrase commanding the serpent to honor the contract they had made. The jaws snapped shut just inches away. The wind pressure alone was blasting Randolph backward but leaving him unharmed. Confusion replaced rage in Dramut's eyes as it recoiled. It demanded to know how a stranger could speak of a pact that had never been revealed to anyone. Park simply smirked, confidence anchored in his knowledge of the game's hidden lore. He recited the terms of the secret contract. Whoever possessed the star would learn the Guardian's true name and become its master, bound by a curse of death should they ever reveal the pact to an outsider. Inside, he exhaled in relief, thankful that the game's lore mechanics were functioning exactly as they had in Pangania. Because he was physically Randolph, but carried the memories of the player who made the contract, the curse created a loophole he could use. Dramut was unsettled by this impossible contradiction, and demanded to know who exactly he truly was. Park didn't answer Dramut's demand for his identity directly. Instead, he commanded the serpent to take him to the star, claiming that the truth would reveal itself there. Dramut issued a grim warning, stating that the star burned the unworthy to ash before they could even approach it. Park countered with a sharp taunt, questioning whether the Guardian was simply afraid that a new master might rise and claim its loyalty. The ancient beast scoffed at the insult, seeing only a frail boy who seemed like he would crumble from a single bite. Yet curiosity, and the binding force of the ancient contract, left the Guardian with no choice but to obey. It decided that letting the star incinerate the intruder would be a more fitting punishment than killing him outright, and turned to lead the way. Isabella followed in stunned silence, unable to understand how he had subdued a god-tier monster through sheer knowledge and confidence. Their path led them into the heart of the sanctuary, where an enormous stone altar rose like a monolith beneath the dark purple sky. Park told her that this altar housed the source of all the sanctuary's power. At its summit lay a pristine white skull resting on a magical seal, radiating a dense, ancient energy. He clarified that this was no ordinary relic but the star itself, the preserved face of the fallen goddess Li. Legends claimed that when the twin goddess died, her divinity shattered into 32 fragments across the continent. These fragments, known to the people of the world as stars, were capable of granting transcendence to those strong enough to claim them. Without hesitation, Park climbed the altar and lifted the skull into his hands. Heat pulsed from the artifact instantly, bathing his face in a blinding crimson glow. Isabella screamed as a blast of magical fire erupted from the skull, engulfing him entirely. Dramut watched with sadistic amusement, convinced that the foolish human had attempted to seize divine power beyond his limits. Within the inferno, Park was silently cursing the Guardian's arrogance, but refusing to let go. He knew the truth behind the mechanism. The star only killed those who tried to bypass the Guardian to steal it. Because he had passed Dramut's test, he was guaranteed survival. The only uncertainty was whether he would obtain the class he sought. Because if someone acquired a star without having a class, then the star grants the individual a class automatically. and even when Randolph had never tried it himself, he only learned about it by accident. As he tightened his grip, cracks began to appear across the skull's surface. The bone fractured and burst into pure light, revealing the essence hidden within, the attribute of void. His hidden traits surged around him in a chaotic storm, merging with the new energy in a spectacle of brilliant shifting colors. A cosmic voice echoed through his mind, acknowledging him as the one who stood before destruction. When the flames finally died, he remained unharmed, surrounded by a majestic multicolored aura of newly awakened power. System messages poured forth, confirming that his mana had transformed into star energy and that he had obtained the class star successor. Isabella's eyes trembled as she witnessed the impossible, a human absorbing the divinity of a star and surviving. Bathed in divine light, Park turned toward her and asked what she desired. Still dazed, she answered honestly. She wanted to leave the desert and uncover the truth about her lost bloodline. He offered to grant her wish and promised to bless her freedom, but only under one condition. She would serve him absolutely for 1 year, after which he would help her reclaim her lineage. Extending his hand, Randolph assured her that unlike the queen, he did not lie. Overwhelmed by the promise of freedom and the power radiating from him, the proud snake princess knelt before him in submission. Park looked down with satisfaction, commending her for making the wise choice. His attention then shifted to the massive serpent lurking in the shadows. Addressing it by name, he watched as the once arrogant ancient king recoiled and stammered, fearful of the aura surrounding the newly ascended star successor. A system window appeared before Park, tallying a staggering 230 points and confirming his dominance in the Hall of Fame. The feat was so extraordinary that even distant combat-oriented constellations began to watch his journey with newfound interest. Far away, in the Desert Queen's palace, the queen was shocked to know that Isabella had entered the sanctuary with the slave that she captured and ordered the squad to seize the two of them immediately without further delay. As the scene shifts to reality, we see that the morning sun washed the city streets in a blinding glare. Inside a crowded cafe, a group of top-tier players gathered around a table, their voices low but their excitement obvious as they discussed the anomaly named Randolph. Knowing that even if they ignored the main Quest 1, then getting a higher score than Gracia was impossible unless one knows the game inside out. And the 5-year veteran ghost player, Phantom needs to be, finally appeared to do it. And this news is going to create a huge ruckus. The men wondered if they can contact him before the others do. But a female player listened with disinterest, sipping her drink as she doubted their chances of tracking down someone so elusive which they cannot find in 5 years. One of the men told the lady that this happened because until now Phantom was not an actual player and was not that strong. But now that he is a real player inside the game, then there must be a way. One of the players proposed a familiar tactic. Since Phantom was now physically present in the real world, he could be baited using the recently reopened secret auction hall. She paused, considering the idea, acknowledging that Randolph would need high-level equipment to maintain his ranking in the next main quest. The strategy was simple and predatory. List a valuable item at an absurdly low price to lure in a desperate buyer, attach a tracking talisman to the item, and then follow it to the target's location to rob or kill them. Another man hesitated, wondering if a veteran like Phantom would fall for such a transparent, beginner-level trap. But his companion insisted that even experts had needs, and anyone striving for power could be blinded by opportunity. The girl's expression shifted from boredom to manic excitement at the thought of someone decisive enough to launch a grand Demon Realm expedition despite past failures. She continued blabbering about how when Phantom sees a cheap and juicy item in the auction hall, he might just buy it thinking that he is so powerful that if he came back then all the pursuers will be dead. Both the boys were so shocked that they also called out 911, trying to report stalking that the girl was trying to do. As they answered, they speculated about Randolph's real-world identity, imagining he must be a CEO or wealthy heir if his in-game prowess was anything to go by. Elsewhere, a holographic interface displayed a brutal update. The player called Massacre had been stripped of his rights and banned from the auction. a hand clenched around the device in fury, unable to accept that another player had accumulated enough points to outrank him. Sitting alone in his dim apartment, Massacre dismissed the setback with a chilling calm. His confidence came from a history of violence. His rise through the rankings had never relied on skill, but on murdering anyone who stood in his way. To him, this setback was temporary. He vowed to reclaim his position by simply killing whoever had dared to get ahead. Back in the game world, a cheerful notification announced the completion of the Sanctuary Exploration subquest. Park was reading about the rewards of a perfect clear. We come to know that the exploration rate was 100% and have acquired the achievement of Conqueror of a Sanctuary, and among them was an epic-grade teleport book. Moments later, they were comfortably riding atop the massive serpent Dramut, with the snake giving directions like a living GPS. As they traveled, a warm light enveloped him from the system, signaling another level up from the earlier battles. Reaching level 3 pleased him, though he noted his progression had slowed. But the boy knew about the reason, which was possessing so many high-tier talents that increased his required experience by nearly tenfold. Even so, he accepted the trade-off. The superior stat growth was worth every extra moment of grinding. Sitting cross-legged on Dramut's head, he grinned as he reviewed the items he had gained from the quest. Isabella watched him curiously, unsure why he was suddenly so cheerful or what strange artifacts he was examining. His attention centered on the Shadow Cloak, a reward that granted invisibility, a useful free stealth skill for future encounters. The serpent's massive pupils suddenly contracted as it sensed a disturbance in the magical barrier surrounding the sanctuary. Some invisible soldier glided through the passage, signaling that the sanctuary's isolation had been breached. Dramut's deep voice resonated through the air as he warned his master of intruders entering the grounds. Park and Isabella reacted instantly, the peaceful atmosphere shattered. Isabella immediately understood who they were. The Queen's pursuit squad had finally caught up. Her expression darkened as she evaluated the threat. Even without the Queen herself, the squad possessed more than enough power to crush them. Park, however, remained composed. Riding the sanctuary's guardian gave them an advantage no enemy could match. With a firm command, he ordered Dramut to intercept the incoming squad to buy them time. The guardian hissed in acknowledgement before turning its massive body toward the intruders, its eyes glowing with lethal intent. Park and Isabella leapt from its back, landing on the stone bridge as Dramut prepared for the impending clash. They sprinted across the sanctuary, Isabella racing ahead while trusting Park's assurance that the Queen herself wasn't among the attackers. Park calculated their odds quickly. If they were delayed here, the main force would surround them, sealing off every possible escape route. They had no choice but to survive through speed and cunning. Isabella glanced back as they ran, relieved when she realized Park wasn't abandoning Dramut out of cruelty but out of pure tactical necessity. He explained the plan quickly. They needed to reach the warp gate at the edge of the desert, now accessible thanks to her lifted curse. But as the massive stone archway came into view, he stopped abruptly, boots scraping across the ground as the critical flaw in the plan struck him. The gate was dormant and required a long charging period before it could activate. When Isabella asked how long, he answered grimly that they would need to hold the area for half a day. With very little cover around them, he could only hope Dramut would delay the Queen's forces long enough. He told Isabella he needed to use this time to communicate with the star, a convenient excuse masking his real need to log out. Isabella accepted the explanation without hesitation, stepping forward with fierce loyalty as she drew her weapon and vowed to protect him at all costs. Trusting her, he initiated the log-out sequence, and his consciousness faded from the digital world. Park awoke in his bed with the morning light seeping through the window, his mind disoriented from shifting between realities. Sitting up slowly, he checked his phone to confirm the time and assess how much of the real world still remained untouched. For now, the monster invasion had not yet begun, giving him a brief but precious moment of calm. Still, the dimensional collapse was accelerating, and he needed to divide his time between leveling in the game and gathering real-world intelligence. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden chime from his phone. When he glanced at the caller ID, his expression soured. It was Kim, his ex, the one who belittled him, used him for money, and abandoned him for a wealthier man, was calling. Memories of their toxic relationship flashed through his mind, ending with the cold dismissal that left him humiliated. The scene shifted to a cafe where Kim sat impatiently, annoyed that he hadn't arrived yet. But she was talking on a pole with someone who was angry and telling the girl to not push it already. Because the man was buying food and clothes for her continuously, but the lady was justifying her actions, telling the man to not act cheap, because it was his responsibility to spend money on his girlfriend even when the man wanted to meet her, Kim denied. Telling him that she had got nothing to say, explaining that she had a meeting with a friend today, so he should not contact her. The boy wanted to know about who she was meeting. But before that, Kim got the call and was annoyed on her boyfriend. She was thinking that even when Park was pathetic, at least he listened to her, and she was thinking that she should have drained him further while she had the chance. When Park finally arrived, she instantly put on a sugary smile as if their past never existed. Still wearing his tracksuit, he stood unimpressed and demanded to know why she called. She attempted to charm him, leaning forward, pretending she missed the qualities she once mocked. She gazed up with practiced innocence, asking whether he had missed her. Park didn't even bother addressing her fake sentiment. Instead, his mind wandered to whether he should order a drink. He noticed the cafe's "one drink per person" sign and realized she hadn't even bought him a coffee despite dragging him here. Disgusted by her cheapness, he simply turned around and began walking away. Panicking, Kim desperately tried to salvage the situation, asking if he was still angry about the breakup. He stopped only to ask if her current boyfriend knew she was meeting her ex behind his back. The color drained from her face at his words. She scrambled after him as he walked out, her voice rising in hysterical pleas, but Park didn't spare her a glance. In the past, he would have collapsed under her manipulation. Now, strengthened by Randolph's resolve, he felt only detachment. As he walked away from the cafe, a violent crash sounded behind him. Turning toward the crowded street, he saw a frenzied man waving a box cutter, screaming at terrified onlookers. The attacker lunged at a young girl with murderous intent, the blade flashing downward in a blur. But before it could reach her, Park stepped in, grabbing the attacker's wrist with force that echoed through the street. The girl looked up at him in stunned disbelief while the man screamed, unable to break free from Park's grip.